I'm Park Howell, and welcome to the Business of Story.
I thought it was just a stupid picture of a pig in the ocean. But after hearing that story, I had to have it. Now I wasn't just buying a picture, I was buying a story. Story literally made the picture worth more money to me.
That's what businesses are about. People buy brands, people buy stories much more than anything else.
I work with a lot of big enterprise companies, but let's just say I always tell folks, drop the PowerPoint, close your laptops, start with your story.
If you want people to get engaged and you want people to act, you have to tell them an emotionally powerful story. That's with great characters, it's with uncertain outcomes, and it's with high stakes and drama.
All business strategy is a story.
One thing we can all agree on is that the digital world is a dynamic place to tell our stories. And never in the history of advertising and marketing have brand storytellers like you had more ways to share your messages. Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, YouTube, LinkedIn, Medium, Periscope, WhatsApp. Ugh. No, that's not a platform. That's just me and my mind spinning through all of the options. But even though we have an always-on megaphone that reaches the world from our kitchen table, it seems nearly impossible to cut through the clutter and be heard. That's why there's a gathering every year in San Diego teaming with the top social media experts to help you figure this out. It's Social Media Marketing World, and it just took place. I was honored to share our story marketing workshop with some 800 attendees last month to help kick off the 3-day event. And I was fortunate to tap into 3 top social media pros who were on today's show. We recorded in the corridors, and you can hear the energy circling throughout the venue in the background of each interview. It was so much fun. You'll hear from Ian Cleary, founder of Razor Social out of Dublin, Ireland. He will share his story of how he became one of the top social media influencers in just 4 years, and how you can use his techniques to build your personal and professional brand online. Also with us is Peg Fitzpatrick, co-author of The Art of Social Media, Power Tips for Power Users. Peg will share ways you can amp up your online presence and build relationships with your followers through visual storytelling. And we'll close with the always effervescent Brian Fanzo on the power of live video and how you can leverage it to tell your brand stories and grow your following. So let's get rolling with our first guest and my new friend all the way from Dublin, Ireland, Ian Cleary. Now, Ian, as I mentioned, is founder of Razor Social, one of the world's leading marketing technology sites focused on social media and content marketing. Ian speaks internationally on social media, writes for some of the leading social blogs in the world, and is often quoted in publications like the New York Times. As an award-winning tech blogger, Ian has also been published on Social Media Examiner, Entrepreneur.com, VentureBeat, and Huffington Post. So let's go to the corridors of the San Diego Convention Center with Ian Cleary. Hey, Ian, welcome to the show.
Well, thank you very much for having me, Park. I'm delighted to be here.
Well, and you just got in yesterday from Ireland.
I did. I came in yesterday, late afternoon yesterday, so I'm no jet lag whatsoever. It just doesn't happen. Forget about that.
That's what happens when you're partying on the Midway aircraft carrier out in the harbor here in San Diego.
Okay, well, I hope you're not recording this, are you?
So it's really great to meet you. You reached out on LinkedIn last week, and I've heard about you. I mean, your reputation precedes yourself, and you're one of the top global social media experts, and you're here at Social Media Marketing World. Are you giving a presentation? What are you talking on here?
Yeah, I am doing a presentation on social media analytics, so that's coming up tomorrow. And it's basically people don't look at the analytics enough. So we talk about social media and building all this presence on social media, but you have to do something with it. So you need to understand, do you have the right audience? Are they engaging with your content? Are you driving them to action? And then what's the results of that action? If none of that's happening, well then social media can be a bit of a waste.
I'm that guy that doesn't like to look at the analytics for 2 reasons, I think. The first one is pure ego. Oh, nobody's watching, nobody's listening, or, I have that. And the other thing, that data just confuses my mind, but I know how important it is. So let's first start with a little bit of backstory. How did you get to where you are today in the social media marketing world? And then, of course, being Business of Story, would love to talk with you is how do you increase one's analytics through telling better stories through social media? So first, your backstory.
Okay, well, my backstory is initially from a technology background. So I used to work management, running development teams, support teams, quality assurance teams. And then I went out on my own. And I was working on project management with software projects. Somebody asked me one day, would I present about social media? I knew nothing about it, so I said, sure.
You're an instant guru, okay.
Yeah, of course, it's the best way to learn, is to train somebody in something. And I have this huge appetite for knowledge. I always had, so I always want to learn, constantly learn. And social media moves all the time and changes, which that helps me. So then I tried to build a software product, and it failed miserably. And I didn't know what to do. And I said to my wife, I want to do something international, not based out of Ireland. And I thought that starting a blog would be a good way of doing it.
And what year was this roughly?
It's about 4.5 years ago at this stage. And with a background in technology and now a new understanding of social media, I mixed the two of them. I had looked at the top 100 social media influencers in the world, and most of them are based in the States. And I set about this journey of building relationships with these people and then creating content that was a little bit different than what they did, with a focus on the technology side. And that opened up so many doors, and things moved a lot quicker for me by having that differentiation in terms of what I was delivering and by focusing on building the relationships. And that involved getting on a plane very regularly, going to conferences, and I'm a real corridor lurker. You know, I don't go to many events. I sit out here to meet people and interact with people. And I mean, the reason we're having this podcast is this because I initiated a connection on LinkedIn. I went through the speakers and go, well, Park's an interesting guy. I'd love to meet Park. I'd love to expand my network and stuff. And that's why. And that business just developed over time. I'm based now in my office at the end of the garden, typically. I work at a couple of global brands and consultancy projects, a few tool providers. We run some training programs, and it's opened up so many opportunities for a small business you wouldn't normally get. But because of the blog and building the presence online and becoming international, that building all that personal company brand, that's opened up so many doors and opportunities. You know.
Well, it's nice to finally meet you. You and I had a chance to chat over drinks last night a little bit, and I shared with you one of my biggest challenges, which I know a lot of people have, is just finding the time to be able to commit to social media, let alone finding the stories and doing a good job of pulling those stories together and commit. Any suggestions on how we can do that?
Well, I mean, you constantly have to be on the lookout for new content and new stories and stuff for your blog. So it's having that appetite and hunger and always connecting and interacting with people and reading other people's content. That just brings in so much ideas. I mean, it's funny with the stories, I'm not a brilliant storyteller. It's something that I've tried to get better and better, and I understand the importance of it. And at my speaking event, I'm now introducing more and more stories because I realize it does engage the audience more. And I need to keep people more on the blog, keep them reading the content. So I've really started embracing the story side. My personal story about my journey, and then the stories within the content as well.
I love to hear that you see that, especially from a social media standpoint, where they're always talking about content is king, content. And I disagree with that. I think if content is king, then certainly storytelling is the kingdom's sorcerer, because it's where the magic happens. So it's not just enough anymore to create listicles and put them out there. Infographics are beautiful, they're great, but how many do you actually recall after the experience? But somebody tells you a good story or leads into a blog post with a story based around a human event, something that happened that your readers or your listeners can relate to and connect with. That becomes very, very memorable. Have you seen that in your own work?
Actually, I've just a very relevant example that I just heard a few minutes ago from Darren Rose at his presentation. And he said that a woman came up to him and said, I remember a blog post from 10 years ago. And 10 years ago, he said he'd no idea what it was, but she explained it was a story about where his wife forgot his name when they first met. And that's what you remember 10 years ago. It wasn't about SEO optimization or any of that. It was the actual stories within the content, Now, what I try to do is I like humor, so I try to introduce stories and humor within the content. And that I find helps keep people engaged, especially on video content. I'm doing more and more in that way. But that really was a good demonstration of the power of a story, is that's what people remember. It's the little things,
It's the human moments that leads to that aha moment. So we can all relate to, oh my God, how embarrassing could it be that I would forget my spouse's name at the moment? But we all have those little idiosyncrasies that hit us. When we share those and we're vulnerable and authentic about it, it just goes a huge way, a long way to help brands, especially in social, whether it's a personal brand that you're trying to build, for your influence, or a professional brand that you're trying to grow sales. It comes to the authenticity of that content, and I think it's about the story.
It is, absolutely. I have another example of a story as well, where a girl came up to me today and said, "Oh, I remember you, Ian, from last year, because I was coming down the elevator and I fell back." And she says, "This hand of God came out and saved me from falling down," And I thought, that's what I need to capture, because that's one that's put a smile on somebody's face. I can spin a good story and a bit of humor in that, and I can weave that into a presentation or a blog post where I save somebody's life in social media.
Is that a Catholic or a Protestant God?
Whichever. I don't mind. If Catholic gives a better story, or Protestant, we'll do whichever one. But it's like you have to, and I have to be conscious of trying to write down these, because I know I can turn that into an interesting story and introduce my content. I'm just not a natural storyteller. I have a sort of a technical background, and you're more drift into like how to do things, and technical content and stuff. But I realized to create that attention, to get people to remember you, it's the story. A lot of times in my email, at the very end of my email, I introduce a little bit of humor. It might be some interaction I had with my kids, and it's been really funny. And some people say they look forward to the end of the email to get that personal touch and the story of what happened to me that week. So it does show that it's so important as part of it. It's not just the content, like you say. Content is so important. It's the delivery of the content, the promotion of the content, and the storytelling that helps with memorability of that content.
Well, Ian, what if I told you actually are a natural storyteller? You were just at the top of your game, like we all were in kindergarten, until education, squelched that in us and whatever. And it's just, I think you're demonstrating it too, that it's becoming just being more intentional and being more aware of it, where we as quote-unquote experts, or at least our business minds, are all about talking about features and functions, because that's what we've perfected our skills on. And yet our reptilian mind is like, yeah, I don't care about the features and function. Tell me what you make happen. Tell me about the event that's going on. So with that in mind, and you are talking about analytics while you're here, have you had an experience where storytelling has had a significant impact in increasing one's analytics in a very positive way?
Well, I mean, my whole story about how I started the blog and started from Ireland, and that story, people love seeing me in my office at the end of the garden and working with the big brands, and going from Ireland to becoming one of the top social media people on a global basis. That story in itself that's made a massive difference to my business. And the reality is, am I the top 100 social media person in the world? Probably not. There's better people than me. But because I built the relationships and created that story, that sort of helped move things quicker for me.
Yeah. And I would venture to guess that people are living vicariously through you and your story. They're seeing what Ian did, and in a short amount of time, just over 4 years, of saying, look, I can connect with that guy. He's just like me, even if I'm not Irish. I get where he's going, and look what he's done. What can I learn from you in this journey so that I can increase, whether I want to be a social media guru or a guru in some other way? How can I do it? And they can live vicariously through you and your story and your experiences. And that's probably why they love that little anecdote at the end of your emails that talks about what's happening in Ian's life.
Yeah, and I mean, I suppose if they can not have as many failures as me along the way.
Exactly.
I mean, it's like if I was doing it again, it would be so much easier. It sounds great that I was like, over 4 years, everything went perfect. No, not really. The first year or two was trying to figure out, well, what is all this content and blogging, and am I just wasting my time on a lot of these platforms, and to figure out, well, what's the real direction? Where's the business as a result of that? Eventually I figured it out, you know, so hopefully as they're following in my footsteps, they can forget about a lot of the footsteps from years ago.
Well, we tell stories and we love stories because they are literally a learning environment for us. So absolutely, we want to try on your troubles so that we would know what we will do in case it happens to us, because you've got all the scars and you've got all the arrows in your back.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm sure there's plenty more arrows to come as well. It's never a simple thing as an entrepreneurial journey. It's, you know, the challenges you face, you just get used to. I don't really classify it as failure. It's a learning exercise. It's just, if you keep on making the same mistakes, it's not good. That's the problem. If you're learning from them, then, you know.
That's where the fail comes in. So finally, let's wrap up, Ian. If you've got a couple, 3 tips that you would share as you're walking through the corridor here. So our listeners are walking through the corridors with us here at Social Media Marketing World. What would they be about just how, and this is as much for me as anybody, is how can I do a better job of amping up my social media?
To me, I mean, we talked about it's content and relationships. So it's the right content delivered in the right way. And like I say, storytelling, it helps, you know, capture the imagination, gets people engaged in your content, gets people to remember the content, and you create that personal connection with somebody. And that all that relationship side, it's building the relationships. You can build a relationship with content at scale and build it one-to-one when you come to events like this. And there's nothing better, you know, at the end of the day, to build a relationship when we sit side by side having a chat. You know, that's where you want to get to. But social media is great for starting that relationship. But you need to have good stories that people are going, I want to be part of your journey.
You know, I started off my session yesterday, my Business of Story session here, and it was wonderful because we had almost 800 people in attendance. I'm very honored to be one of the first, you know, kickoff workshops here. But it's just what you said, this thought of nothing in social media makes sense except in the light of connection, because we're all about it. And what I mean about connection is how do you connect human beings to human beings? And that's basically our unit of measurement of our success, connection and conversion. And yet we're doing it from afar in social media. We're never sitting across from each other. We do video, you know, live video to bring us, you know, more immediacy to our message, but we're still not mano-a-mano like we are here. So I think, anyways, it is that story that helps make that connection, that human connection online and off, critical.
Oh, absolutely. There's no doubt about it. You know, and I think like with live video, and now that's going to keep on opening up as our mobile phones are going to be more capable of delivering live video to everyone. Like I heard recently in some countries, they're only really rolling out 3G and 4G. So now they'll actually have mobile, you know, video on their mobile phone. So that helps to have that, but you do need to have the story behind it as well.
All right. So what's your final goal for Social Media Marketing World this year? You've been to a number of these. You're going to be presenting. What do you hope to get out of these by the time, or get out of this particular one by the time you head back to Dublin?
Well, I suppose first thing is to get out of it with a successful presentation, and I don't have a flop, you know, and if I get 800 people, I'll be very happy, you know, so that'd be the first. Really, I'm here, it's relationship building for here. I sit down and have conversations, and conversations lead to opportunities. You know, already there's a real good potential opportunity from conversations I've had here. So I want to reconnect with people, and it's like topping up things. You know, you interact with social media, then you meet them in person, and then you go back to social media, and 6 months you might meet them again. You keep that relationship open, and things just happen, you know, at amazing opportunities. I done a conference with Mark Schaefer in Dublin last year, and that all started by meeting him at a conference and becoming friends, and then going, let's work together, you know, so... Yeah. But yeah, to me, it's reconnecting with people, forming new relationships, and then see where that can go from there.
Well, I really appreciate you reaching out last week and making the connection with me and getting a chance to meet and chat with you and have you here on Business of Story. Thank you so much for taking your time, Ian.
Well, thank you very much, Mark, for having me on your show, and delighted to be here and delighted to meet you in person as well.
Take care, and I will share with you that you will share with your fellow Dubliners, I hope, story on. Thanks, man. Next up on today's show is Peg Fitzpatrick. Peg is the co-author of The Art of Social Media, Power Tips for Power Users. She is currently the Director of Content Strategy and Social Media for Tailwind, the premier Pinterest and Instagram visual marketing platform. She has spearheaded successful social media campaigns for Virgin, Audi, Mercedes, Google, and Motorola, as well as working as a brand ambassador for Adobe, McDonald's, and Kimpton Hotels. Peg is a popular speaker at blogging and social media conferences, and I'm just so honored to have her on today's show. Here's Peg. Peg, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me.
Now, we're hanging out here at a 10-foot round table or a 10-top round table at Social Media Marketing World in the San Diego Convention Center. You just got done with a book signing, and I really appreciate you taking the time. How many of these Social Media Marketing World conventions, conferences have you been to?
Oh, that's a good question. I think fourth. I think this is my fourth. Yeah, there's a lot of people here.
How did you get into social media marketing?
Well, actually, I got into social media in general, working with my husband's company. It started out as a dinner where I was throwing out a bunch of ideas, and next thing you know, they wanted to hire me. So,
well, who did? Your husband did, or some?
No, actually, his bosses. So I work for a German chemical company called Chrysler Incorporated. I work for the U.S. division of that company. So I actually started out in day one with a job in social media, which is kind of different than a lot of people, they get a job, after working on it for a long time. So I started out, and then I just started learning by reading Social Media Examiner, reading people's blogs, and coming to conferences so I could learn how to do things, and especially free webinars. I think people miss that opportunity to really dive in and learn how to do things. There's a lot of free opportunities that you can work up to if you can't afford to come to a big conference.
So did you not have a lot of formal training in it? You were just kind of intuitive in social media, and a few red wines led to some good ideas that got you hired?
Well, I actually did traditional marketing for another company before that job. I did traditional marketing. I did email and some online things, but it was before really social media started. So I kind of just had the idea to do traditional marketing, but spin it online, using email to reach people and to contact people. Which, that goes in and out of favor. But, here we are in 2017, and email is still a great idea. Building your list is still a great idea because you can reach people. So it's interesting how things come back around that way.
Well, and now you've got a book out, The Art of Social Media with Guy Kawasaki, and it's been out for a couple years, 3 years, I guess. So you have really become a guru, if you will, in how to use imagery in visual storytelling in social media and particularly Instagram?
All visuals. I do visuals everywhere. Pinterest and Instagram are especially things that I love because they are super visual. But yeah, I do. I love the visual piece of it. I think it's something that maybe I found a little bit earlier than other people where, blogs just really need images to tell the stories. It's not enough just to write a really great blog post, which in the past would have been good enough, but now you need great images to help tell the story. And there's so many more opportunities now with visuals. It keeps expanding and changing to tell stories, like carousel posts on Instagram and Facebook, where you can do a series of photos or take one photo and crop it so people swipe through to see more things. And then, of course, Instagram stories are very visual little snippets that you can create, that last for 24 hours. So the visual storytelling I think we're just at the beginning of it, but it's really interesting, I think.
Do you think the visual storytelling is so powerful now because we have such short attention spans and we kind of need that fishing lure of that visual to pull us in, beckon us into the post to then hopefully capture that reader and move on? Or is there something more to it than that?
I do think that you do have to have good visuals to capture people's attention. But on a platform like Instagram, you can't post without an image. Facebook, you can. Twitter, you can. But Instagram and Pinterest, you have to have an image. It's not even a choice. You can't post if you don't have one. So it really does push that. And so then it's as a brand or a storyteller, how are you going to use that the right way? Because it can't just be any image either. It has to really fit your brand. It has to tell a story. It has to be like a great image. There's so many different things. And now we have visual search, Pinterest visual search and Google image search. So the images are actually being searched whether you put words with them or not. It's getting complicated out there.
Do you have recommendations on how to find an image or design an image that actually tells a story? What goes into the creation of that?
So the first thing you want to do is make sure that you know what your brand is. Like even if you're just an individual, you do have a brand online because it's all the things that people see about you. If it's your photo, it's your text, and it's also the images that you share. So you're creating a story, whether you are doing it on purpose or not. So it's important to figure out what your brand is, whether you're a blog, a person, or a company. So you want to create a little brand style guide for yourself and just pick a few fonts, 1 or 2 colors. You don't have to overdo it, which is, I think, one thing that people think, I'm going to design something and they put too many fonts and too many colors and they switch their colors all the time, and that gets confusing for people. So you want to just have 1 or 2 fonts, 1 or 2 colors, like a main color and an accent color. And then you just want to find images that fit your brand as well. So if you're the business of storytelling, you would want to have stuff that always fit. Maybe it would always have a pen in it, or maybe it would always have a book in it, or maybe it would have something in there that indicated stories and reading. My blog is pink, and I'm a blogger, and I write about social media, so I try to pick images that are computers or smartphones or tools, a desktop, but things that kind of tell the story without them seeing it. And once you build that over time, people know now when they see my images, it has my little pink circle with my name in it, and they know what my graphic style looks like. And when they see it, they say, oh my gosh, I knew that was yours, so I couldn't wait to go read your blog post because I knew that it was yours and I was going to like it, which is a huge compliment. But it shows you how you're sprinkling all the little seeds out there of your visuals that lead them back. Of course, it has to lead to great content too, but it's the things that people see out there. If it can stop someone from scrolling on Instagram or Facebook, so they'll actually click it and then click through to read it. It's a lot of steps to get people's attention now. So those are all the ways that, kind of the quick overview, but it's really your style and your branding. And the images do matter a lot, and you can use stock photos, but you just want to make sure that they're not the the really bad,
the real cheesy ones,
really bad stock photos. But there's places like Unsplash or Libra Stock, which have free photos that you can legally use, and you can find really, really great, clear, perfect photos in all different kinds of areas. So just do a little bit of a search. Never ever Google search and take an image because you don't have permission to use it. But just kind of define what your visual style is and make it fit with the rest of your brand. Are you a funny brand? Are you a serious brand? The images should all match that. You can't go back and forth and have, it's kind of like making a personality. You want it to reflect. And of course, if you're a personal brand, making it really who you are is the easiest, because then, you know that it's going to fit everything that you do, and it fits. Yesterday, I posted a picture on Instagram where I was getting my hair done, but it wasn't done. It was not all the way done. So I just did it I'm a work in progress, because I just thought it was kind of funny, because you don't always have to show the end final look my hair is done. I just thought it would be funny to show it in between. So
that's called storytelling. You're right in the middle of that event of getting your hair done.
Right. And that it's kind of where do you decide to do it? Do you take a picture going in? Do you take a picture when it's done? Do you show only the end? Or you could do an Instagram story and show the whole little thing, do a little sequence of videos. So there's a lot of different ways that you can choose now with all the tools that we have to create really compelling, I think, stories. Even, don't you think it's getting more interesting?
Oh, it completely is. And I want to go back to that point that you made about being very consistent with your brand and your brand personality. So it's important to find those 1 or 2 font families that express that. And like you said, the look and feel. One thing that I coach our folks on is go out and truly understand what your brand personality is, and you can do it by simply going through brand archetypes and using Carl Jung's 12 primary archetypes. So to your point,
about those in a long time.
Yeah.
Yes,
Because
let's talk about it.
if you're the jester archetype, like you say, have fun, then you want to surround yourself. If you're the guru archetype, if you're the hero, the regular guy, gal, that is what is the authentic personality that you're trying to communicate. And then to your point, to go and find imagery and tell stories that are reflective of the vulnerability, the authenticity, and who you really are and are about.
Yeah, I agree with that. That's totally true. And it's interesting that of those archetypes, they just repeat themselves through history. And now maybe they're even more amplified because we have social media. But the thing is, you can't choose something that's so different from yourself that you can't live it. That's the thing where I think people make a mistake when they're just starting out. They think, well, I'll be this person. I mean, it is a new world and it's like a new way for people to meet you, but you can't truly be something other than what you are. And the more authentic you are to yourself, the better everything is and people love it. So that was one of the things, early on. I'm a small town girl. I come from a small town and you just know people and talk to people. I'm just like I am. I've been my whole life. I try to, I remember people's names and I try to be friendly and, that's just who I am. So I just do the same thing online and it resonates, I think, because that's who I am.
I had one of the nicest compliments coming out of my session yesterday when someone told me, the content was good, but I could tell your passion. You were so into it that you really honestly believe this stuff. And I go, well, yeah, but it goes to the point that you have to just be yourself and let your personal passions drive those professional pursuits. And then I think have some fun, even if you're a serious person.
Yeah.
Have some fun, loosen up, because we're all just bombarded with serious stuff all day long, right?
It's true. I tell myself that when I'm presenting too, I'm like, I hope I'm smiling. I smile all the time, but then when I present, I'm super serious because I'm I want to make sure I get everything in, and I'm I hope I'm smiling, but I forget about that until later. But I think people get that, hopefully.
I've had a lot of fun in promoting Business of Story on Instagram, and I am by no way an avid Instagram user. I get it on there sporadically, and I know I've got to step up my game. But I did what you're talking about, and it's a great effect. I had a lot of people mention it, that I kept it very simple, always a white background, and I was trying to sell my podcast, promoting my podcast. So everything had to do with earbuds. Every visual had something to do with earbuds, and literally, I'm your new earbud. I got really corny in some cases. I use the Interstate font family exclusively. I don't deviate from that. And I typically always have my logo in the same place so that when people see it pop up, they get a bit of my personality, which is sometimes tongue in cheek and don't take ourselves too seriously. But hopefully then getting them to look at just the act of listening to a podcast a little bit differently.
Yeah. A white background is perfect too because it just gives white space. You don't need to clutter everything up. Simple is better. Yeah. And I think that's also what makes everything hard. Making things simple, it seems like it should be easier to write less content or make an image with less things in it, but you feel I'll just add a little more and a little more, but simple is so good.
So can you help me? And in so doing, you'll help my listeners. I do my podcast once a week, and that takes a lot of time to set folks up and record them and get that out. So that's the one thing I do. And then I need to be blogging more, but I get a post up 2 or 3 or 4 times a month as I'm focusing on the podcast. But I love Instagram because I love making those crazy little images and sending out there. See, but I'm sporadic at best. I post on there once or twice a week, maybe some weeks without anything. Yeah. And I know there's a lot of folks like me out there, and I want to really engage it more for my podcast. What would you tell me to do?
Okay, so since you have so many great guests on your show, you could do things like pull quotes from the different interviews that you do. You can do that as a teaser beforehand to say oh my God, I had this great conversation with Peg at Social Media Marketing World. Can't wait to share what she had to tell you about, So it's just a little teaser. You could do the process of podcasting, maybe some of the editing, people behind the scene things. These are the steps that I take when I'm going to have an interview. I interview, but then I have to do a lot of editing and I add in bumpers, and a bumper is this, and there's a voiceover here, and I do a break here, and I speed this part up a little. You could talk a little bit about the process, so because that would be interesting for people. I'm not a podcaster, so the steps of it may be wrong what I just said, but that idea of it though, a little bit of behind the scenes, today's an editing day, just show some of your editing tools, and every once in a while show your face. That's the part that sometimes I don't do. When I look at my whole grid, when I go down a whole 9 grid of photos and there's not a photo of me, then I'm okay, time to show my face again, because people want to know the person behind the brand as well, especially on a podcast. They don't see you on a video or anything. So every once in a while, show yourself. Make sure that you put a little bit of yourself in your story because that resonates really well. And you can vary like shorter or longer posts. Like you could do some with a lot of text. If you had something funny, you could make it short and funny. Or if you had something longer, you could write something longer, just say like, I was having this interview and we talked about this and this made me think about this other thing, and like write a little bit about how that inspired conversation. You could even just talk about how you interview people. It's an interesting process, and maybe other people would be interested in learning that. Or you could talk about like how you find guests, what it's like to work with different people, what you learn, because you always learn with people. Every interview that you do, whether you're interviewing or being interviewed, you learn something new about yourself, what they do, something new about the world. So you could talk about those things too, because people are interested in people. So those are some I would do.
How could I use Instagram story? I haven't quite figured that out yet, because to me, the people that are doing it aren't really telling a story. They're just kind of throwing a bunch of stuff. But who's doing a good job with that I could learn from?
Okay, well, Sue Zimmerman does like a whole day long story. She's somebody who kind of like all day shows you what she's doing all day. And I do some like that too, where I'll do it kind of, what's going on that day. But if you're at home, it's not always that easy. So I try to think mine out, and I make a little storyboard for myself to try to have like 4 or 5. And then I just kind of make a little plot for them. Like I actually do a little timeline and say, I'm going to do this, I'm going to do this. So you can tell a story with them. It just takes a little bit of work to set it up, and then just make your decision. Are you going to be somebody who shows what you do all day, or do you want to actually tell a little story that would have, so then you just want to do the beginning, middle, and end kind of thing, which is what I do. I try to do the beginning, middle, and end. Or if it's for a blog post, I'll be like, hey, I have a new blog post up, and then I'll show the graphics. Like you can check it out on my blog, which is this, and then I'll maybe talk about, then I'll like go on camera on the Instagram story, and I'll say, if you were ever wondering like how to interview people for a podcast, you could, this is what I did. You can go watch, read my blog post. So I kind of do that where I'll introduce something that I'm working on to tell people go listen to the podcast or read the blog post. So there's a lot of different ways you can do it. You can either just do it like telling your story of the day, or telling the story of like, please go listen to my podcast or read my blog post, whatever it is. And then you can also put your own spin on it. Use white space. You could do your logo on it. You can make graphics for them too. If you didn't want to be on camera, you could always do ones where you make graphics to kind of tell a story.
What if people say, but I'm not an artist, I don't know, I can't make graphics? Where do you recommend they go, and how best to tackle that if you're not comfortable with your graphic making capability?
Good question. I use Adobe Spark a lot. They're super easy to use, and you can use it on your desktop and your phone. And you can create animations in the app on your phone, which are really cool in Instagram stories. I've used them. And they just added a new Instagram stories size. So it's perfectly sized for it. I used to use the Pinterest one that didn't work exactly perfect. But yeah, so you can, and it's easy because they have like this drag and drop feature which you can't see, but I'm moving my hands.
Theater of the mind. It's radio.
I talk with my hands a lot, people. So it has like really great drag and drop features, so you can move the text easily. So if you're worried about not lining things up or having it look good, they make it super easy. Like you just pull it in and out, and it resizes easily without having to mess up everything. So, and
then you have your selected font that you use for it, and I suppose it gives you headlines, subheads, text.
It does. You can't customize it as much. If you wanted to only use a specific font, like you were talking about, Canva, you can add your own fonts in there. So you could also create things in Canva and pull your own fonts in there if you have Canva for work to save it with your logo and all those things. So
your co-author, Guy Kawasaki, Canva is his platform, right? I use it. That's what we use. I have not used Adobe Spark yet, but I'm going to try that after.
Yeah, if you use Canva for work right now and you have your logo in there and all that, it's perfect, especially if you work with a team, because you can do Canva for work and share the graphics. And you can just set up a couple templates so your logo is always exactly in the same spot. So there's benefits to both. At just mobile, Adobe is better on mobile for me.
They're closing the door on room 24. Do you need to run in there?
I do.
Can I ask you one last question? What is your favorite social media platform and why?
Oh, that's so hard. I love Instagram and Pinterest. Pinterest has been like a true love of mine for a long time. Twitter was my very, very first, where I really like fell in love with social media.
That was your gateway drug.
My gateway drug. And I love Pinterest because it's quiet and you just do things there, you're like pin things for yourself. But Instagram, I feel like, is where the conversation is now.
It's quiet. So it's like you're curating imagery over on Pinterest, but if you want to go out and have some fun and get a little crazy, it's Instagram?
It's Instagram. Yeah.
Well, Peg, thank you so much for being here. It's great running into you. And I really hope you enjoy the rest of social media marketing world.
Thank you for having me.
Awesome. Take care. Finally, I am so excited to have Brian Fanzo on today's show. I had listened to his workshop just before we did this interview, and you can't help but love the guy and be energized by his, energy. Brian talks fast and he tweets even faster. He's a proud pager-wearing millennial and is a keynote speaker and founder, CEO of iSocial Fans, a social strategy consulting agency. Brian also co-hosts Smack Talk podcast and FOMO Fans podcast. Brian's hashtag Think Like a Fan philosophy has powered first-of-their-kind storytelling campaigns for many Fortune 50 enterprise companies leveraging Periscope, Snapchat, and Facebook Live under the username @iSocialFans, and that's FANZ. He was awarded the top 25 social business leaders of 2014 by the Economist Intelligence Unit and was nominated for the first ever Shorty Awards Periscoper of the Year 2016. So let's pick up my conversation with Brian right now. Hey, Brian, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me. Excited to be here, and we're doing it live. How much cooler is that?
Well, and I first got familiar with your work last year because the first time I was at Social Media Marketing World, and so I've just been seeing you all over the place, since then, and you just did a great session on live video. You are a digital storyteller, and I got to tell you, after sitting through that, I feel like, oh man, I'm not worthy because I've been trying to do this Facebook Live thing and I'm not all in quite yet. But that was one of the main points that you made is if you're going to do live video, you got to be all in.
Yeah, I think, for me, the live video is a great amplifier. And, I think for storytelling, I love the story side. I always tell people I don't want to be a live video, thought leader. I like using live video to tell my story in a unique way. And it's really that idea that, hey, if I'm going to do it, I'm going to go all in. And I'm also going to be okay with the need not to be perfect and the idea that control might not be always what I have. But when you embrace that and you go all in, it's had a massive impact on my business, the businesses I work with. But it's a commitment because it's a completely shift. I always tell people, if you're not using live video, you're not behind the curve because it's still so early. But it is kind of a shift in mindset from where we create content or how we tell stories traditionally, and it's exciting.
Well, you're a very powerful digital storyteller on this side, and you're talking about control. So you actually come from a background of control. You mentioned that you were in cybersecurity. So how did you give us your backstory? How did you get from cybersecurity into what you're doing now?
So I always introduce myself as a change evangelist, and the reason that is because I have a really weird background. So I after college, I was a computer science major. I went to work for the Department of Defense as a contractor, and so I actually did that for 9 years, 3 trips to Iraq, 2 to Afghanistan. I grew a team of 34 employees that our job was to implement and then help really embrace collaboration between all the different branches of the military, sharing their cybersecurity policies. So I always tell people, if you want the hardest job, get the Army to share something with the Navy and the Navy to share something with the Air Force. But I did that for 9 years, and it was great. I really enjoyed the team. But for me, driving change and being passionate about what I do is really what gets me out of bed. And unfortunately, in the cybersecurity space, especially for the government, a little bit of slow turning wheels. We were playing defense. If you did your job really well, nobody knew. If you did it bad, a drone fell out of the sky, or heaven forbid, someone's life was in danger. And so I decided, I got promoted, and I had a light bulb come off and say, if I want to do cyber for the rest of my life, I'm probably in the perfect location. But if I want to change, I need to change now. And I ended up turning in my clearance, and I went to a data center company. So if you talk about interesting worlds, and I went, and they were trying to move into cloud computing, and it's really where my love for change. And they hired me and said, hey, what you changed inside of the government, and trying to get these people to really share and kind of change the way that we've thought about collaborating in cyber. We wanted to do that when we changed how our clients, our businesses really think about the future of computing, which was that space. And so I started doing that. It was really a job I built after Guy Kawasaki and Robert Scoble. I wanted to be the evangelist. And it was I reported to the CEO, I had a dotted line to the CIO and the CMO. And it really gave me this amazing opportunity to work with their customers without having sales requirements, bring that feedback back to the product marketing team or product management team. And I really, kind of kept the story straight from, hey, this is how they're actually using our product instead of, what we thought they were using our product. And throughout that time, I really didn't know much about the data center space, didn't really know much. I didn't take a course in cybersecurity, which is a whole nother. And I always said I went to YouTube University because I studied every weekend just watching people talk about, cybersecurity and then data center. And as I was doing that, I started sharing, and it was about November of 2013. I decided, I have a unique story, and I'm going to start to tell it everywhere. And I created a couple of my brand, which is iSocial Fans, and I decided everywhere and anywhere that I can tell my story, I'm going to do it. And I started doing that. Then I had less than 2,000 followers on Twitter. I had only spoken a couple stages in the social media space. Fast forward 2016. I have 100,000 followers on Twitter. I spoke at 50 events in 11 countries. And I shifted and decided to do the entrepreneur route after 2 years in data center because I wanted to be able to impact change at pretty much the biggest level I could. And it's a lot of fun. It's not your typical background. I always tell people I never had a marketing job, but I speak at a lot of marketing conferences because I come at it from the mindset of the consumer rather than the mindset of the marketer.
It's interesting to me that I just picture you in the dark bunker somewhere, like trying to thwart the Russians. By the way, did the Russians hack us?
I'm going to plead the fifth on that one. But I will say my very first night in Iraq, the very first time, we slept in a bunker. And we got mortared that night. And I'm no military background. I was very blessed. I had a Marine attached to me full time because of my clearance. And that next morning, we got out of the bunker and I couldn't sleep that night. And we were talking and he's just like, just put your noise canceling headphones on. And I'm like, really? There's no way I'm putting noise canceling headphones on. We just live in a bunker.
They're sending a life canceling mortar in. And you want me to put in noise canceling earbuds?
Yeah. So I do. If you can picture me in the bunker, I was in the bunker, and the last thing I wanted to do was put noise canceling headphones on after that. So it definitely had an interesting impact on my life since then.
So you've gone from this secretive realm into reaching out to the world and say, here is how you build community. So it's just this exact dichotomy. When did you know you wanted to get into social media, start working in the marketing realm, and really become a digital storyteller?
So for me, it actually started to be when people were really reaching out and say, hey, Brian, I want to do what you're doing, or I want to understand, how things changed. And for me, I didn't feel like I was doing anything that was special. And I've always loved sharing. I was never a great student. I really struggled to get good grades in school. I got diagnosed ADHD at 31 years old, so way late in life. And that changed my life. I've read more books in 4 years, I'm 35 now, than I did in my first 31 years of my life. But throughout my life, I really figured out that I really love teaching. I have a passion for helping people understand something that is confusing for most. I say I translate the geek speak, and I can take something that seems hard, a process that seems hard, and translate it. And as I started to share that journey, especially I'd say November, late 2013, early 2014, people were coming up to me, being inspired by what I was doing, and all I simply thought I was doing was teaching. And that light bulb went off for me and said, hey, if I can really leverage marketing, if I can understand a lot of the background here, I believe I can reach that audience that I really want to. Because, for me, when I get up in the morning, my passion is I like connecting great people with great people to do great things. And the mediums, I don't care if it's Twitter or Facebook or Periscope. That's not what I'm about. I'm about how can we reach the most amount of people to connect. And the embracing change part is really what I get known for now. So I do a lot of live video presentations, but I also work with a lot of brands on how they can attract millennials and think differently on that side. And it's just a different approach to change, and marketing kind of fit perfectly.
Yeah. Well, I hate to tell you, but I believe that ADHD is now a communicable disease, and we're all the viruses. So we're all suffering from that. And in that vein, how do you rise above the noise? What is it that you do as a digital storyteller that stands out to get you to the point that you're growing, 100,000, followers on Twitter and blowing up on YouTube and everything else? What's the secret to be a really good, powerful digital storyteller?
So I think it's twofold. I think social media and digital is extremely hard and painful if you're putting on a persona or you're telling a story that really isn't you. You know, it's painful. You have to think about a tweet, you have to craft. And I spent a year, my first year, trying to post what I thought everybody else wanted and post what I thought people wanted to hear. And it was so painful. I wanted to give up. I had no interest. But then when I realized that people follow me for me, and the story is who I am, what I'm about, not what I do. And I said that on stage. You know, what you do is extremely boring. It's how you do it, why you do it, and then how it's going to impact your audience. And so I say be yourself, and I'm even wearing the shirt. You be yourself.
Hashtag be yourself, yellow on a black shirt.
It is. You know, I'm a Steeler fan, so everything's black and gold. It's very branding on that side. But so being yourself, when I started just telling my story, being okay with my flaws, sharing my ADHD battle, it was amazing how easy it became. And also, the only way you can guarantee you can stand out is you can be what no one else can, which is yourself. And then the second part is I use the hashtag show you care. And what show you care meant to me was people would say, well, how'd you get on this person's radar? Or why did this brand reach out to you? And I would always say, I did a little bit more than everyone else did, but I did the basics. So simply saying thank you when someone, retweets you or shares your content, or reaching out, for me, one of the things was if I want to get on your radar and I want your time, I want to show you that I spent time learning about you. So if I want to reach out to Park, and I'm like, okay, rather than just retweeting your content or talking about it, I'm going to click on your blog. I'm going to go see something that's really, what's your most common theme? What's the most popular thing that you care about right now? I'll reach out to you and say, hey, Park, I'd love to get on your radar. We'd love to chat. And I love these blogs that you have on A, B, and C. And I think Show You Care was simply just doing that little bit above and beyond what everyone else was willing to do. And I started standing out. People started remembering me because I did just that little bit more.
I can tell you, I had that experience with you. I didn't know you. I saw you in action last year, and we've got some friends in common through Jay Bear and Lisa Leffler and whatever. But I remember after Social Media Marketing World, you pinged me a couple times. And I thought, well, that's pretty cool. I wonder, and I didn't even know we had those people in connection before. So I saw you do that in action. And I got to, I remembered you because of that, because very few people do that.
That means the world. And I can tell you, and I remember Kristen Cardos, who used to work for me, and she went to your session, and she came out of the session, and her first words were like, Park is someone you want to get to know, like you love storytelling. And so you were immediately on my radar. And that was my goal, is say, hey, I don't want everyone, I think in this space, you can reach out and be like, me. But if there's a way that you can reach out and celebrate, like, hey, I love your podcast. Hey, let me share this out. Is there anything I can do for you? When you're caring about them before they know they care about you, it changes the whole dynamic. And I'm glad to see that that worked. And we're doing the podcast.
So let me ask you, a lot of people call themselves storytellers, digital storytellers, and some are really good at it. I think just naturally they're able to do it. And others, most people, including myself, you have to get very intentional about it because we tend to default back to features and functions. How do you approach it, or how do you keep story at the forefront of your mind so in your presentations you don't default back into being just another social media guru? I mean, how do you use that?
So listening and learning every day. I look at every possible scenario, every person I meet, every conversation I overhear as a chance for me to learn. And I really do. I feel if I understand the audience and the community more than everyone else, I can tell a story that's going to relate. And without being the person that's consuming content, I consume 30 minutes of content every single morning using an app called Flipboard, and I consume what my audience is sharing. I want to know what they care about, what's their pain points. Because for me, telling that great story, the reason I love storytelling and studying it is because I believe you can never be perfect at it, and your audience always changes, therefore your story always has to adapt. But at the same time, if you're able to understand who you're talking to, that story kind of flows with you. And I think that piece is really important. And I also, the hashtag that I use, and I was giving out stickers, is think like a fan. And I think of the great storytellers that impact my life. And you talked about Jay Bear, and Jay gave a presentation yesterday, and I felt like he made me laugh, he made me tear up, he was inspiring me, he motivated me. And then he educated us, and he did that all in a 30-minute keynote, which he's the best of the best. But I feel like when you look at a storyteller like him and you start to study what he does really well and how he uses mannerisms and these things, it really works well. And the last part is I kind of have a little secret on that side of I played professional poker for a couple years, and so I studied nonverbal cues. And
Texas Hold'em?
So yeah, I did the World Series of Poker for 4 years. I went to Joe Navarro, who's a retired FBI agent. He teaches nonverbal cues studying. So So I wasn't a math guy, I was a people guy. So if you sat at a table, I could read your body language. When I'm on stage, I'm reading body language in the state of the audience to know, okay, this slide's drowning on. People are changing their body language. And I even do that on video. So I watch other people on video and I can see if they're moving in, they're moving out, how they're dilate. So I really like the art of studying, and listening. But I think the fundamental of all of that is I feel if I listen and understand the people that I'm telling the story to better than everyone else, that I can create really that story that is memorable.
You realize the theme here. You've got the cybersecurity theme, keeping an eye on what's happening beneath the surface, subtext to everything. And so as you were watching people, poker, Texas Hold'em, big time, you've got to watch the subtext of what's going on. And every great story has subtext to it. We say one thing, but we actually are trying to underscore a different point. So it's interesting. I don't know if that's ever been revealed to you or not, but in what I've heard and what I've seen in action is it all totally makes sense.
You're the first person that's ever said that, and it's like a light bulb going off. And this is another example, right? I always want to learn. You're interviewing me and having a chance to learn, but no one's ever kind of referred to it that way. And that's the truth. And I think, wow, it's, now looking at that and looking even in my life, like I was the only one in college that I played college hockey. I was a computer science major and I was the president of my fraternity. And not one person was the same in any of those. But like the subtext of it was really, I loved leading people. And there was such an element of being able to understand what made everybody tick and then bring people together. So I would have parties and things that brought the most dynamically different groups of people together. And wow, that's a light bulb for me. I appreciate that.
Well, and I heard a line from Robert McKee, the legendary screenwriting coach who's been on the show a couple of times, and he said, our subconscious, or our conscious mind is simply the PR department for our subconscious mind where all the real decisions are being made. And that's why all great storytellers, you tell a story on a conscious level, but there's always subtext to it. He's saying this, but he really means this, or he's saying this to underscore this down here, and that's what the real power in story. I think you do that naturally. I think that's what comes across in your live videos and just seeing you in action here.
I appreciate that. My mom said I came out of the womb talking. So, and the very first thing I got ever tagged with, I was speaking at a large event for Amazon, and I got off the stage and like, you talk fast and you tweet faster. That was I got labeled.
That's what you have on your hat that's turned backwards, and then on the back of the hat I'm seeing talk fast, tweet fast.
You do. And the interesting thing is my dad owned a candy company growing up and a peanut brittle company. And then we owned a frozen yogurt shop that I started managing at 14, and I hired and fired friends before I was 16 years old. But one of that fundamental element of, for me, I appreciate, saying that I'm a good digital storyteller because I feel I've always had people around me. My dad always talked about the stories of people that he met, and the most popular I think quote that people know me for now is that my dad messaged me on a live show and said, "Son, I love what you're doing, but social media will never replace a handshake." And I read that and I'm like, "Dad, you're right. It will never replace a handshake, but if you do it well, you can turn handshakes into hugs and selfies," which is kind of my tagline. And that to me is what I really love doing. I love telling stories. I love learning about people, and knowing that and hearing it from someone like you, that means a lot, because I think in this space, storytelling is a buzzword, and it is I think a buzzword that's thrown around without studying it. And I'm a big Doris fan. Is it Jane? I can't remember her name. It'll come to me in a minute. Okay. But so she studies some of the most popular speakers out there.
Nancy Duarte?
Nancy Duarte. Actually, Jane Deweese is who introduced me to Nancy the first time. So Nancy Duarte actually turned me on to speaking and the art of story, and on that side. And I've really spent a lot of time understanding even the digital story aspect and how can I change some of the demeanors and way that we connect with people and in authentic ways. So that means a lot.
We had Nancy on the show about 6 months ago, and they came out with a new book. So it's really great. Yeah, she does some really brilliant work, and we'll have a link to that in the show notes. Folks, I can tell you this man is a man of steel, because we're sitting here in the convention center and we just literally had a pigeon walk by us. He didn't miss a beat. So to wrap up, can you give us what are your best tips? You gave us the 5 strategy steps for live video. I'm a guy that's wrestling with live video right now, trying to get on there every Friday, but don't always make it. So for me, for the rest of the listeners, what do you recommend? What's the best way to really make live video work for us?
So, I think we're living in a really, noisy environment right now. We have more channels. My grandfather always said he had 3 channels on his TV, but he didn't have a remote. So he really only had 1 channel a day because he didn't want to go up and change it. And so I look at live video as the great amplifier of what you're already doing great. And so when you're looking at live video, don't look at it to replace, a marketing plan or a sales plan, but try to figure out a way to give people access into something they can't get anywhere else. I live stream my podcast, and the reason I did that is people didn't understand kind of the mechanics of a podcast or what it looked. We record them on Skype usually, or in a back room, and I started to expose and give them access to that. And to me, that's where live video comes in there. And I would say that the tip, and I think we talked about this the other night too, is consistency is extremely important, and giving people kind of a place to go. And then last but not least, no one really cares about what you do. What you do is extremely boring, right? I think if you give people access on live video to why you do what you do and how you do what you do, that's where the magic happens, because that's where they start to get to know you better. And the amount of people that come here to this event, and they're not talking about me as a speaker or me with the strategies. They're talking about, hey, I've seen your daughters, or how was Las Vegas when you were traveling there? Because they get that kind of unique access that they can't get anywhere else. So for jumping into it, that's my goal. And then the last part is just, I say, press the damn button. It's scary, it's overwhelming, but oftentimes if you just press the button and have fun with it and deliver it, you'll start to figure out what works best for you.
Great. How can people learn more about you and what you do?
So I said consistency, so I have to practice that. So I'm iSocialFans with a Z or a Z at the end. I'm iSocialFans on every single channel because I'm the guy that likes to be on the new stuff. And then it's iSocialFans.com as well. So that's where my site is. And I speak at about 50 events a year. So hopefully we'll run into people at events, and I back up what I practice. So hugs and selfies all around, and there's a lot of fun. I'm so glad you asked me to be on the show. I'm a big fan of, educating on story and listening and learning, and your podcast is one that I listen to every single episode, so it means a lot.
Thanks, Brian. I've got a parting gift for you then, because I am also a big believer in people buy why you do, the Simon Sinek. So I'll give you your very own What's Your Story workbook that you can use and share with your fans. It's designed to help people really understand what it is they do and why they do it, because I'm also a big believer that personal passions drive a professional pursuit. And I see that totally in what you're doing, and I think that's why you're having such an amazing impact out there in the world. So thank you for all you do.
Thank you so much, and I love that you said that, because my high school guidance counselor told me, Brian, you're so passionate, you could be passionate reading the phone book. And I actually took it as a bad thing at the time, because I was like, does that mean I'm not known for anything? I'm not passionate about anything? And now I've learned that ability to share your passion and convey that message is a key element for me. So I love that we're very much aligned on that, because as soon as you said that jumped out. But this is a lot of fun. I will definitely take you up on that and share this with my community.
Thanks, Brian. Appreciate it. Thanks for listening to this edition of the Business of Story. I would like to give a big shout out to Michael Stelzner, Phil Mershon, and the talented and uber customer-focused team at Social Media Examiner for hosting another amazing event and for inviting me to be a part of their 5th annual Social Media Marketing World. I'd also like to extend a personal thank you to David. Now, David was my speaker handler. He made my job so easy, and at one point he even said, "Oh, Park, I forgot I have a gift for you, but it's back at my hotel, so I've got to run back there and bring it back. I'll be back in about an hour because it's about a 2-mile round trip." And I said, "David, you don't have to do that." He said, "Oh, yes, I do." Well, you know what? He returned with the most exquisite pair of red, blue, and black socks. I even put them on before I went on stage, and I just loved them. But that's the kind of customer service David delivers and what Social Media Marketing World is all about. So I just want to give him a big shout out. And now, if I can be of service to you as a speaker on story marketing, or if you would like to take advantage of one of our 1 or 2-day Business of Story workshops to help you get your brand story straight, get your people all pulling in the same direction, connect with audiences like you never have before, drive customer loyalty and engagement, and truly drive the performance of your business, well, please just let me know. Shoot me a note over at park@businessofstory.com. Would love to help you out. And until next week, when we have author, strategist, and conspirator of business success, Robert Rose, on the show, have a wonderful life.